Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you all for joining us for The Real Truth About Health. It's really an honor to be here. So I'd like to just start. I'm in the living room of our home. We just returned after a 5-month lecture tour. We gave about 70 lectures across the country promoting compassion for animals and healthy living. And I'd like to just begin by dedicating our time together here this morning to the healing of all of our relations. So let's just take a moment and just go within. I'm sitting at the piano and give thanks for this precious opportunity that we have to connect more deeply with the truth that we are, and know that we live our lives to be a blessing to all generations. And so it is. So I think the underlying message I want to be sharing this morning with everyone is the foundation of health, which is really spiritual health, and cultivating compassion and kindness and respect in all of our relations. And then also questioning all of the official narratives in our society that uh, really propel us, I think, in many ways to trust outside authorities. One of the foundational understandings is that we have, each one of us within us, an inner authority, an inner wisdom, an inner guidance system that we can connect with that will guide us, to know what is the right food to be eating, the right way to be living, and so forth. And so I have a new book right here, The World Peace Way, which kind of goes into these ideas. I want to be talking about some of the ideas in the World Peace Way. Just came out a few months ago. And so I'll go ahead, I guess I'll just go ahead and share the screen. I want to say that this is, before I do that maybe, that a couple of things. This is uh, April 19th, which is Patriots Day, where I grew up in Concord, Massachusetts, back in the 1950s. And so this is a big day. This is April 1975. Hardly a man is now alive that remembers the famous day and year of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. And this is the beginning of the revolution. And actually, one of my ancestors, Joshua, I believe his name was Tuttle, was killed in that war by the British for freedom. And I really feel strongly that this underlying uh, ability that we have in our society, the Real Truth About Health conference really reflects this, the importance of freedom of expression, medical freedom, freedom of assembly, and of freedom of speech, that we have to really protect these. They're under attack, freedom of bodily autonomy. And so just dedicating this conversation to freedom for all living beings. And one of the underlying ideas I'd like to share really is that our routine abuse of animals for food and other uses, products, research, and so forth, always boomerangs back. When we steal their health, and we're doing that millions of times every day, we're forcing animals into terrible conditions and forcing disease upon them and obesity and everything else, and breaking up their families. And we find that as we sow, we reap, and it comes back. And we find we have the same diseases that we're inflicting on them, and the same social problems that we're inflicting on them. Loneliness is a huge epidemic, and every animal is reduced to a lone unit of production in a heartless economic system. And we find the same thing happening to us. So we need to, I think, really as a society understand that liberation of animals is the foundation of human freedom, and health and kindness for other expressions of life is the foundation of the same thing for us. So that's one essential thing. And then the other, I just was thinking, when I first spoke for the Real Truth About Health conference, it was 2013, and I was in my late 50s, and now I'm in my early 70s. And I have to say, it just gets better and better all the time. I've been a vegan now since 1980, so that's now 45 years. And That's something that I really highly recommend, just because something that I understand, I think, quite well. My wife Madeline and I have traveled now we've been married for 31 years, and so we've been traveling to all 50 states and 50 countries all over the world, in Africa, Asia, and Europe, and North and South America, and Australia, New Zealand, everywhere, and sharing these ideas. Over 4,000 presentations we've given, and I've just realized, talking to people all over the world, that the abuse of animals for food and other products is really the spinning fury at the core of the disease in our society. And once we begin to liberate animals, we find that our lives get so much better ourselves. So let's jump into it here, and we'll go ahead and um, do this. Let's see, this should work, I think. And so the basic understanding, maybe I'll go back with just one here. These are the three books that, the main one, as we heard earlier, The World Peace Diet. It's been translated now into 19 languages. It was an Amazon bestseller worldwide back in 2010. And I've recently released Food for Freedom, which I just was talking about that. And these are both philosophy books primarily. They talk about why it's so important for us to question the official narratives in our society. And then The World Peace Way focuses on just purely the how we can actually be healthy, not all of us, how we can create a life of radiant health for ourselves on every level. So the foundational understandings, basically, the main thing is the good news that all of us have a physical body that does not require us to harm animals, to get all the nutrients that we need to celebrate our lives on this beautiful planet. So this is the basic good news. And I think this is, from my experience, basically talking to people, and I know that this is controversial, but the underlying idea is that all of the nutrients that we need come from plants. So if we eat animal-based foods, meat, dairy products, or eggs, fish, whatever, that the nutrients in those foods originally came from plants. All of the amino acids that make up all of the proteins, for example, are made by plants through photosynthesis, the 20 amino acids. So we can eat the plants directly, and animal-based protein is really much more difficult for us to metabolize. It creates more acid than plant-based proteins, for example. All of the fats also come from plants. Plants, again, through photosynthesis, create all the essential fatty acids that create the fats, so we don't need to eat animal foods for fats. In fact, and the other thing is that complex carbohydrates, which really are the fuel for our physical body that we're designed to run on, are pretty much non-existent in animal-based foods. And these burn cleanly to carbon dioxide and water, carbohydrates, and you can give off glucose, and glucose is the main energy source for our brain and for our muscles. So this is really good news that these nutrients come from plants, and there is no fiber also in animal-based foods, and fiber is a critical nutrient. So the more we can make the foundation of our way of eating whole, organic, plant-based, I would say plant-sourced foods, then we have a fantastic foundation of health for ourselves. So this is a really important point to just right off the bat to talk about. The other, a couple more main points, is that all of us are born into a herding culture. This is generally not recognized, and so we don't think of ourselves as living in a culture that's organized around herding animals. We think of that as long ago, far away, people lived that way, but Madeline and I lived in an RV for 17 years, traveling around North America, and I can tell you pretty much the entire country, the land has been enslaved to animal agriculture, to growing vast fields of genetically engineered corn and soy and alfalfa and other feed grains to feed to these imprisoned animals that we normally never see. They're stuck away in these stinking sheds by the thousands very often, or by the tens of thousands. And it only takes a few humans to dominate and exploit them. And then at one point they'll be slaughtered and they'll end up on our plates. But this is extremely harmful to our health, and we don't really understand it. We don't realize it. We don't. It's invisibilized essentially, and we just see when we go to a restaurant or we go to a store, we see saran wrapped packages of flesh and we see gallons of milk, but the underlying um, environmental devastation and violence to animals, to wildlife, to human beings is pretty much invisible. So it's good to realize that we're in a hurting culture. That helps to explain a lot of why we have so much war and conflict and disease in our society. And the good news, again, the empowering good news is that each one of us as individuals can question these practices and the underlying philosophy and create an alternative, which is really what we're talking about. Also, the third one here, there are stages in the evolution of our awareness. So the beginning stage of understanding this is very difficult. We have to actually make the transition. We have to learn about nutrition in a whole new way. How do we get all the nutrients that we need to thrive and celebrate our lives here on a totally plant-sourced diet? Also, we have the problem of other people who don't support us in that. They think it's ridiculous. We hear questions like, well, where do you get your protein? And if everyone went vegan, cows would take over the earth. And we think, oh gosh, I didn't think of that. What do I do now? So we're basically a small minority when we decide to abandon eating animal foods. And so it's difficult. It's very challenging. We have a lot to learn, a lot, as I said, a lot to unlearn. And how do we deal with Thanksgiving and Christmas and other and holidays and restaurants and all these different things. So that's the first stage. If we manage to persevere and get through the first difficult stage and actually establish ourselves eating a whole organic plant-based diet, then very often we end up in the second stage, which is I call the angry vegan stage, and which is really in a way hard to avoid, because as we start to feel better and understand and look more deeply behind the curtain of our society's routine mistreatment of animals and each other, we begin to see that, gosh, we could make such a more beautiful, loving, healthy world if we would stop imprisoning animals and killing them and sexually abusing them and stealing their babies and killing them. And it's so much unnecessary violence. It's completely unnecessary. People, we don't need to eat animal foods. We can thrive. I mean, I'm not the only one. Madeline and I have been doing this for 45 years, and we're in our 70s, and she's actually 5 years older than me. So, we're just one of millions of people who are long-term healthy vegans. So we see how unnecessary this is, and so we tell our friends and neighbors and colleagues, what about switching over to eating a plant-based diet, a plant-sourced way of living? And they, of course, very often say, well, no, I like bacon. I'm going to continue this. And so we start getting angry and frustrated. Some people avoid the angry vegan stage by what I call the closet vegan stage, where we just don't want to talk about it anymore to anyone because either they ignore us or they make fun of us or who knows what. So the good news is that there is a third stage, and I've written my books really to help us move to the third stage of deep veganism. You could also call it holistic veganism. Holistic health and holistic living is really that's the key to me, for me, in everything. As big a view as possible, to really look at the big picture. And when we get to the third stage, I have to just say it's just fantastic. There's a tremendous sense of joy and freedom and gratitude and health that begins to permeate our lives. We begin to just feel the benevolence of the universe, that we're part of a benevolent universe, and that we can every day be a voice for those who have no voice. We can learn and grow and contribute and cooperate in ways to help build a more kind and loving and healthy world, and that every day is precious. And we're very aware, I think, that we're on this planet for a limited time. So that's the next one I want to emphasize, that our life, even though we talk about longevity, and longevity is a great thing, I think, but I mean, really, even if we eat really healthy, a lot of sprouts, maybe we get 10 decades, 11 decades, 12 decades maybe. But I'm very aware that when they interviewed the oldest living human being a while back, a woman from Japan who was 117 years old, documented and so forth, and they asked her, "Wow, you're 117. What's it like to be so old?" And all she said was, "The main thing I can say is it went by really quickly." So our life goes by quickly and it's brief. We'll all be at the point when we leave this physical body. That's guaranteed. That's the one thing that binds us all together, humans and animals and all of us. We all have a brief life, and it's that that underlying idea that gives our life its preciousness. That flowers are beautiful because of their transiency. Plastic flowers are not that beautiful because there's no poignancy, there's no transiency. Our life is beautiful, and the lives of all beings are beautiful because each one of us is a flower. And so we're just here for a few short years, a few days. So how do we spend our time? That's really the question. And the underlying problem, really, in our society is that we are raised in a society where we steal the purposes of other living beings every single day by the millions. And when we steal the purposes of other beings, as we sow, we reap. So we lose our purpose. And that's the underlying problem. And again, I was just reading yesterday that scientists are saying that we face an absolute epidemic, not only of loneliness in our society, especially among the younger generations, people in their 20s and 30s, a tremendous sense of social alienation and isolation. Social media is not helping, but just the fracturing of our society, the divisions in our society, but also a tremendous loss of meaning and purpose. People uh, wonder what their purpose is. And so I think, again, we we shouldn't be surprised at this if we live in a society where we're stealing the purposes of cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys and ducks and geese and fishes and all these other animals by the millions every day, that we have lost our purpose. If we enslave them, we shouldn't be surprised that we find ourselves in a situation where we're becoming enslaved ourselves in many ways. So, freedom and joy and happiness and health are absolutely available to us every moment to the degree that we give them to those who are at our mercy. We hold them in our hands, right? Here they are in our hands, and we can let them go and let them live their lives as they did for millions of years. Chickens, for example, thriving and celebrating their lives in the jungles of Southeast Asia. We've seen them doing that. It's so neat to go to Vietnam and see the chickens living like they did for millions of years in the jungles of Southeast Asia. But we violently took them out of their habitat. We've done that for all these animals. And so that's really an essential point. And then this idea that we have an inner guidance system is so critical. We live in a society today of technocracy and the idea that somehow science will solve all of our problems. Forget it. Science is absolutely not going to do it. We need spirituality. Science, quite honestly, I've looked into this pretty deeply, I feel, and when we go to the core of our culture, we see it's herding animals. And it goes back 10,000 years. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but the foundation of herding animals is the domination and exploitation of other living beings and of nature. And so the very first science was figuring out how we can manipulate cows and goats and sheep to breed them so that we can get more milk and more wool and more flesh, and they'll be more compliant and docile, so they're more easy to control. And this whole idea of dominating and exploiting nature and separating ourselves from nature, materialism at its core, is deeply rooted in our science. And so there's tremendous delusion being propagated in science. And there's It's the materialism essentially. And so the good news again is that we are spiritual beings essentially. What we are is eternal consciousness. We are not merely a physical body with a name and a collection of memories and ideas and aspirations. We are consciousness, eternal consciousness, manifesting for a few short decades through a physical vehicle, but we are not this vehicle. And if we are told in our society from the time we're little kids that this is all we are. We're just matter. Because we look at cows and pigs and chickens as just matter. We just buy and sell them by the pound, by the millions every day. We buy and sell living beings like they're just sacks of cement. I mean, this is not only profoundly ignorant and insensitive, but it's satanic, it's demonic, it's something truly, it sets up massive delusion, and we create a science that leads us farther and farther and farther away from wisdom. The more we, there's this great saying by Giordano Bruno, in the medieval philosopher. He said, if the first button on one's coat is buttoned wrong, then all the other buttons will be wrong as well. That's the problem. And so we need to get back to the foundation of our spiritual nature as eternal consciousness, recognize that, see that in ourselves, see that in each other, realize that the outer form of whatever age and race and gender, sex, whatever, we are conscious, our species, to see the being. And when we see the being, then we have a sense of connection, of love. So the essential understanding is that there's one life living through us all, and we are that life. And we're all related. The fundamental interconnectedness of all life is the critical idea. And these ideas bring health to every cell in our being. When we are living with this understanding, then we have a purpose. We understand that we have a purpose, a reason to awaken and to be part of the awakening of humanity during these critical times. And that's feeding every cell in our being with a purpose. If we don't have a purpose, our body is wondering, well, why are we doing all this work for this person who's who's basically avoiding their responsibility? So the key thing really is that idea of responsibility, that each one of us is responsible for the quality of our life, for the quality of our food, our relationships, our choices. And when we are proactive in this responsibility, when we really go out of our way to cultivate wisdom and connect with our inner guidance system, then this proactive capacity to be responsible it liberates us. And we no longer have to trust outside authorities who very often are indoctrinated into delusion. I went through a Ph.D. program at the University of California at Berkeley back in the 1980s, #1 ranked school of education in the country when I went through. And I can say it's 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 a training that brings one into a system where you're rewarded if you don't question it. That's the basic thing. And fortunately, I had gone through a lot of Zen training before that, and I was able, I think, to get through it without being wounded too much. But the underlying idea is that we need to question all the underlying narratives in our society. And when we do that, then we're on a path of health. So the final point is, as I mentioned, materialism is the religion of our age, causing this massive destruction of animals, ecosystems, and each other. So the alternative is spirituality, ahimsa, which means nonviolence, realizing that we are nature. As soon as we set ourselves up to dominate and exploit nature, we are sowing the seeds for disease and unhappiness for ourselves, kindness and respect for all living beings. So these are the foundational understandings. I want to focus a little bit now on environmental health, cultural health, physical health, and psychological health and spiritual health. So the idea essentially here is this is the real truth about health. And most of us, when we hear that the title of this conference and we think about health, we think about physical health, right? We think we want to be healthy. How can we really be healthy? And so the main thing here is to realize that physical health is embedded in and completely interconnected with all these other dimensions of health, and that all of them are interconnected with each other completely. So there's three outer dimensions of health, which are physical health, environmental health, and cultural health. There's two internal dimensions, psychological health and spiritual health. And again, these are completely interconnected. So anything that harms one of these will harm all other four. And anything that benefits one will benefit the others. And the key thing to remember is that animal agriculture, which is the core of our society, it relentlessly erodes and harms all five of these. So I will just briefly go into this. Essentially, environmental health is harmed by animal agriculture, and we understand that we can't be physically healthy if the water is polluted, the air is polluted, the soil is eroded, the ecosystems are breaking down, and so forth. That's devastating to our physical health. And animal agriculture is the single most devastating activity that human beings engage in on this planet because it's so amazingly inefficient. We have to grow huge quantities of food and feed that food to animals, and they waste it. They turn basically what could be healthy plant-based carbohydrates and protein and so forth, grains and legumes into saturated fat, cholesterol, acidifying and inflammatory animal protein, huge amounts of sewage, nitrous oxide, other gases. All of it is polluting. And so there's this massive deforestation going on in the Amazon right now, for example, cutting down about an acre per second of rainforest in order to grow genetically engineered soybeans to feed to imprisoned cows and pigs and chickens. And factory farm fish eat huge amounts of grain. And then so this soil erosion, water pollution, water depletion. We see the aquifers being depleted, unsustainable rate, and so just the oceans being completely overfished. I mean, since the 1980s, every year the fishing capacity has increased. We have more boats, more technology, and every year the amount of wild-caught fish has decreased. So now it's about 2/3 of all the fish that we are eating are basically come from aquaculture operations, factory farms for fish, which I've visited, and they're just disgusting. Just black water. It looks like there's no fish in there, and then you look deeply and you see, oh, it's packed with fish swimming in their own feces, and their workers are dumping in antibiotics and other chemicals to keep these poor animals alive, and they're killed, and they're either we eat them directly or they're fed to other animals. Cows eat huge amounts of fish. Chickens and pigs eat fish meal to boost their production of dairy and eggs and to fatten them up. So we have this whole system, very perverse system, where we're feeding animals to animals, vegetarian animals. I mean, animals that would never eat fish. I mean, you don't see a cow trying to catch fish, but they're eating huge amounts of fish. It's the same thing. What we do to animals, we do to each other. So we feed meat to these basically plant-based animals, and we end up feeding meat to us. We're basically plant-based animals too, right? We just do the same thing. We don't realize it. And these cows, if you ask them, they'd probably say, "Oh yeah, we're designed to eat meat. We've been doing it for many generations." And it makes them sick. I mean, if you feed a cow grass, they're healthy. If you enrich their feed, right? We enrich their feed with soy, which they're not designed for. That causes a lot of problems for cows, feeding them soy. It's much more it's a very rich food, but it's designed to boost, make them fat, and so we do that, and that causes E. coli and many problems and that make us sick. But we don't stop there. Then we feed them meat, fish meal and chicken litter and the feces of other animals and so forth to fatten them up. And so they're being exploited by feeding them very overly rich food. Does that sound familiar? Anyone who's eating animal foods is being exploited. We have to really understand that clearly. Eating animal foods, we are not only exploiting other animals, we are being exploited. And our freedom is being stolen from us. There is no freedom if we don't have health. This is a really important thing to just contemplate. Health is the foundation of freedom. Being proactive to take responsibility for our health is the greatest gift we give to ourselves and we give to other people. That's why I'm so grateful to The Real Truth About Health, because this is a platform for questioning the official narratives in our society about health, and each one of us taking responsibility for our health, of our dental health, visual health, bodily health on every level, all these different specialties, and questioning what we're told by the authorities, and realizing that the only authority we can trust is our own inner wisdom. Ultimately, even within this conference, the Real Truth About Health conference, there are people who disagree, right, on different finer points maybe, but authorities are always disagreeing with each other. So we, as the patient or the consumer or the one making the decision, so who should I trust? It really comes back to us. We have to have this inner wisdom, and maybe they're all wrong. And we have, it's really up to us to cultivate our inner wisdom. So, animal agriculture is devastating to ecosystems more than anything we do, as I was saying. So the greatest gift we can give to the earth, to ecosystems, to nature, is to move to an organic, whole plant-based diet. That's the key. Organic. We should really, for sure, not be eating anything that's not organic, because we're spraying glyphosate. I'm sure many people are aware of this, but glyphosate is a broad spectrum antibiotic, and it just devastates the microbiome, not only of the soil where we grow our crops, but also our own microbiome. And our microbiome, as we understand, is really not only the foundation for our healthy body, but also there's a direct connection through the vagus nerve to our emotions. So if the bacteria in our body are not happy, we're not happy. So it's really well understood that one of the foundations for happiness and joy and just the basic feeling of gratitude that we're alive is having a healthy microbiome, and that comes from eating organic, whole plant-based foods. Then we cultivate a healthy microbiome. And atrazine is another thing that's sprayed on crops, which is a hormone disruptor. And we see so many problems with gender dysphoria and all these social and psychological problems and physical problems that come from hormone disruption and paraquat and other chemicals that attack our nervous system and our brain. And so really, organic, whole plant-based foods is a no-brainer, right? I mean, that's something we should really understand, for not only for our own health, but for the environment, and we're not separate from nature. So these are things we can understand. We can bring our lives into alignment with these understandings, and we can share these ideas. Cultural health is critical, because if our society is sick and divided and toxic and so forth, it's very difficult for us to be healthy. And again, animal agriculture is always destroying the health of our society because it's so inefficient. We're growing enough food every year to feed everyone. Most experts say easily feed 15 to 20 billion people with the amount of food that we're growing, if we would feed the food directly to people, but we don't. We feed most of it to cows and pigs and chickens, and they waste most of the nutrition. And so we have starvation and chronic hunger. Almost 1 billion of our brothers and sisters are chronically hungry and starving, which sets up all kinds of conflict and war and injustice. It's well understood that we'll never have peace without justice. And so the basic idea is that those of us who live in industrialized nations with high-powered economies, it's easy for us to bid up the price of grain on the world market and feed that grain to our cows and pigs and chickens and fatten them up and eat their flesh and dairy products and eggs. But people in less industrialized countries who don't have high-powered economies cannot compete with us. They cannot afford the grain, and they're going hungry and starving And so we literally are moving into these other countries and taking their land with large corporations. The big bankers in the background are getting rich on this whole thing. And their people are going hungry, and their land is being used to grow grains, to feed livestock, and that's being exported to the wealthier countries. So when we take out our wallet and we pay for meat, dairy products, our eggs, we're paying for a system. We're directly causing environmental devastation, hunger, and violence, and the whole refugee situation. People having to leave where they're living because they're hungry, traveling to other countries. I mean, all of these things. These are all interconnected problems that go back to hurting animals and to animal agriculture, plus the fact, talking about cultural health, we have whole armies of our brothers and sisters who have to do the work that nobody wants to do, to kill these animals, to impregnate them against their will, on what the industry refers to as rape racks, to steal their babies and kill their babies. I mean, these workers have the highest rates of worker-related injuries and among the highest rates of suicide, drug addiction, alcoholism, spousal abuse, child abuse, and so forth. So again, the fundamental teachings in all the world religions and the wisdom traditions of our planet that we can really cultivate a connection with is don't cause your brother to stumble, right? Don't do things that are going to bring out the worst in other people. Why would we do that? We should try to live our lives to bring out the best in other people, because we're all interconnected. The more we bless others, the more we're blessed. The more we contribute to the welfare and happiness of others, the more we're happy and healthy ourselves. The more we erode and don't care about the wealth and health and welfare of other human beings and of animals and ecosystems and future generations and all the living beings that are interconnected, then the more ours is eroded, right? So we live in a society where this is happening, where we're systematically disconnected from the consequences of our actions. Our media is controlled by the pharmaceutical, medical, meat complex, and so we're not really told these. That's why we have to come to this wonderful conference to learn some alternative information here and understanding. So having a healthy society, again, is critically important, that we move to a plant-based way of eating. Physical health, I've already talked about that. And this whole conference, there's a lot of wonderful speakers that are talking about the health benefits of an organic, whole, plant-based diet. That's really foundational. And the good news is it's delicious, right? I mean, that's one of the things I realize as going along, is that there's a vast variety of grains and fruits and nuts and seeds and starches, and potatoes and sweet potatoes and mushrooms. I mean, there's such as thousands actually of different foods. And one of the things also that I like to emphasize is the importance of growing our own food as much as possible and supporting local farmers and growers. We can grow sprouts. Like for 17 years, we couldn't grow any food because we lived in an RV, a fifth wheel trailer pulled by a pickup truck, and we traveled around and gave lectures every week in a different city. And so we could grow sprouts. That's it, on the counter of our RV, and we'd grow alfalfa and broccoli sprouts and eat those. But now we have a little land. It's not much. We only have about a quarter of an acre devoted. We have a half an acre. About a quarter of an acre is actually um, able to be devoted to a garden here in Northern California. But we have 75 fruit and nut trees that we've planted ourselves and that give us tremendous amount of food. We have 6 raised beds of vegetables and lots of berries, and so really in a very small amount of land, even in an apartment, in a porch or on a deck or somewhere, we can grow food. We can grow tomatoes and peppers, and there's lots of ways of again being proactive to take responsibility for the quality of our food. But when we grow our own food, it really sets up a wonderful symbiotic relationship with the land around us. And so we are able to grow a lot of food that we eat, that we can give to our neighbors, that we even sell at the local farmers market. Sometimes we have so many nectarines and peaches sometimes, and apricots and other apples and things. So it's really a tremendous abundance on this earth. That underlying idea that we live on a planet with tremendous abundance. We can easily feed everyone on this planet on a fraction of the land. If people, it's not uncommon for people with only a quarter of an acre or even less, just a city like a suburban plot, to grow several thousand pounds of food every year, plenty to feed themselves and even more. So we live in an abundant universe. We could easily feed everyone on a fraction of the land. And the underlying idea is that we are not some uh, mistake, some species that's condemned to war and violence and poverty and the problems that we see everywhere, environmental devastation and so forth. It's just that we have an obsolete food orientation that we've inherited of eating animal-based foods. Nobody chooses it, right? We don't choose to eat animal foods. We're just basically conditioned into it. We're compelled into it by people, parents and teachers and friends and neighbors and relatives who similarly were compelled into it. It goes through the generations. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But just understanding this, that physically we can thrive on a plant-based diet, and there's millions of people doing it. It's just understanding a few basic things. It's not difficult. And because plants have protein, right? They have carbohydrates, they have vitamins and minerals, they have everything that we need are in plants. We don't need to go outside the plant kingdom to get nutrients. And so that's okay. And then psychological and spiritual health, I would like to talk about those two. Just it's so important. And this is really where we get to the key, critical, most important actually ideas, that psychological health is maybe the most important of all. Well, spiritual health is the most important, but psychological health is critical, because if we don't have a healthy mind and feelings, we're not happy. And our mind can be our most wonderful friend, but it can also be our most severe enemy. And so it's like a piano. I'm sitting at this piano, and we're all given a beautiful piano, and we can play. We can make beautiful music, and we can create a beautiful world. And yet we're taught in many ways to not to make beautiful music with our piano, the piano of our mind. So I think the whole idea is that there's a tremendous freedom in learning to use our mind well. And so the spiritual practices are critically important, to meditate and pray and introspect and inquire into our true nature, and realize that we are eternal consciousness that was never born and will never die, and that the underlying psychological requirements of living in our society are not in our best interest. So in the books that I've written, especially in Food for Freedom, I go into a number of these. I'll just do it very briefly here. The main one really is disconnectedness. In other words, when we're born into our society, we are sitting at the table, we're getting food, right? We're eating food. That's the most important teaching that comes across all species, from parent to offspring, is food. I remember watching some ducks in Switzerland, and a mother duck and her little ducklings, and I realized that was it. She was teaching her little ducks, eat this, don't eat this. We're always looking at our parents, whatever our species is, and to eat this and don't eat that. And so we eat the food that we're eating because of our parents, but we're not just eating the food, we're eating a whole constellation of attitudes that go along with it. Anthropologists understand that every society transmits its values from generation to generation through rituals, and the main ritual in every society is meals. When we sit down at the table, we're bonding at a very profound level. What is not me becomes me, right? So this is an alchemical miracle. And so this is really critical to understand, that we're eating attitudes. If you go to the grocery store anywhere and go to the baby food section, you'll see in these cute little jars of baby food, you will see not only vegetables and fruits, but you'll see chicken and veal and cheese and beef and all, so little babies who are just getting their very first food, they're already getting animal-based foods. So it's very important to understand that this is something that is not our choice. In fact, one of the most important things I think to understand actually is that the only reason anyone eats animal-based foods is because they're following orders. That's the only reason any of us do it. We're just following orders that were injected into us without our permission from before we can ever remember, by very loving people who wanted us to be healthy and happy and wanted us to get plenty of protein and plenty of calcium. So they fed us animal-based foods because that was what they thought. So there's no enemy here. It's just a delusion that's been handed on. It's a superstition. It has devastating impact, but that's what it is. So the underlying um, set of attitudes is don't make the connection, between what's on your plate and what it took to get it onto your plate. This is something we literally do not like to do. We don't like to think about the terrible suffering and violence that was a pig went through to have bacon on our plate. I was a little kid. I loved bacon. I was the first one at the table when my mother said we're having bacon. When I could smell it, right? I was like, oh, smells so good. All that fat and salt. Yum, yum, yum. But actually, if my mother had told me what it was, that this poor animal had been confined her entire life in a cage, and she was banging her head against the bars, driven into insanity, just because she couldn't turn around, and then they hauled her out and hung her upside down by one leg and cut her throat, and she was screaming, and now we're going to eat. I mean, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to think about it. So we don't think about it. So this underlying violence, terrible violence and abuse of unimaginable scale, we just block it out as a society. We put up a curtain and we say, we're not going to go there. We're not going to think about that. We're going to pretend it doesn't exist. And yet we're eating it. So disconnectedness is the foundation of our society. It's the foundational attitude. And when I got my PhD at Berkeley, one of the things I studied was it was a PhD in the philosophy of education, and education is about intelligence, and what is the definition of intelligence? It is, ironically, the capacity to make connections. That's intelligence, is the capacity to make relevant connections. So if we live in a society where the main activity, the main ritual that we're engaging in 2 or 3 times every single day is eroding and decreasing our ability to make connections, it's eroding and decreasing our intelligence. And it's not just cognitive intelligence, but also affective, emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence. And it explains a lot why we have the problems that we have, why we don't use our intelligence in a more positive way, to instead of creating bombs and systems of surveillance and all these destructive tendencies that we have, why we're not creating beauty and harmony and freedom and joy and love through the intelligence that we have. So it's been hijacked in many ways. Our intelligence has been suppressed and reduced. And when you want to have people who are easy to control, right, you want to dumb them down. We have whole armies of scientists whose job basically is to try to dumb down animals, right? And I mean, because it's much more um, profitable for animal agriculture if the pigs and chickens will just sit there and fatten up and not attack each other, not bite each other. They don't have to cut off their beaks and cut off their tails and do all these things. If they could just breed them into being just objects that don't have any intelligence. Well, we have scientists doing the same thing for humans, to try to breed us or to create systems that reduce our intelligence. We're much easier to control if our intelligence is reduced. And we're being poisoned, I mean, deliberately. And it's pretty obvious, because the more we're poisoned, the more our intellectual and physical capacities are reduced. That's, again, why it's critical for us to be proactive, to be responsible about our intelligence, our ability to make connections, connect the dots, and understand what's really going on and not be gullible, not just believe authorities, what they say. And this intelligence is the most important thing we can cultivate. It's the greatest gift we can give to the world, is to cultivate our intelligence, not just our cognitive intelligence, but our inner guidance system, our inner wisdom. That's the great gift. and that's spiritual. But its ability to make connections that's eroded by animal agriculture, and there's many other attitudes. I'll just give a few more. Like, the subtext of every meal, also besides disconnectedness, is might makes right. Right? We eat animals because we're stronger. We have the technology to just completely dominate them with our knives and our fences and all of our things we do. And our dogs we had in the old days. So we dominate and exploit, and so and again, and that leads directly to the idea of privilege and elitism, and the domination and exploitation of the weak by the strong. And we have a society where we see that inequality keeps growing exponentially. It is. I mean, in 2018, there was a big study done, and everybody was kind of upset because we realized that the top 1% of the most wealthy people on planet Earth had as much wealth as the other 99%. I mean, this is gross injustice when 1% has as much wealth as the other 99%, and they can use that wealth to control the governmental, educational, and business, economic institutions, and dominate everyone else, basically, and control us. And they did the study again a few years later in 2022 after COVID, and it was doubled. Like, the top 1% has twice the wealth of everybody else, and it's going more and more in that direction. So again, it shouldn't be a surprise when we see that whatever we sow, so shall we reap. If we're going to continue to sow the seeds of the domination and exploitation of the weak by the strong, and we're going to exploit animals, we're going to be exploited. The same, if we look at cows and pigs and chickens merely as livestock, if we reduce them to just objects to be bought and sold by the pound, we shouldn't be surprised that there's others that look at us the same way as just objects to be exploited, and to dumb us down and to dominate and exploit us every way they possibly can, to create educational systems and foods and other toxic chemicals to dumb us down and control us. That's exactly what's happening, very clearly, obviously. And we shouldn't be surprised because we do the same thing. If we're eating animal foods, we're doing the same thing. And as we enslave them, we sow the seeds for our own enslavement. So these basic ideas, and there's many others actually. When we think about it, every disease really that we see that we're having a problem with, we are inflicting on animals. That's the irony, and we don't see it. Right? We don't see the fact that, for example, we have this obesity epidemic, and it never gets better. I mean, it just keeps going up and up and up and up. Obesity in the United States is increasing all the time. And what do we do to animals? Again, we have whole armies of scientists that have one job: to fatten animals as quickly as possible. We have chickens now that are fattened up and ready to be killed when they're only literally 36 days old. I mean, we can't even imagine. That's like a little baby that's so ballooned, so fat, because it's profitable to do it that way. And so, same thing with cows and all these animals. They're obese. So we sow the seeds of obesity in all these animals, and we get an obesity epidemic. We sow the seeds of osteoporosis in all these animals. So we force them to overproduce eggs and milk, and we find the same thing happening to us. We have this osteoporosis epidemic. We sow cancer, of course. They're living in toxic environments where they're force medicated. There's over 10,000 different drugs, hormones, antibiotics, and chemicals that have been approved to be inflicted on these animals. And we find ourselves getting force medicated. We find cancer and other diseases in these animals, and we get cancer because we force them to live in toxic environments. We end up living in toxic environments because we force that onto them. We break down their families, and we find our family structures are eroding and breaking down. We force them all to be lone units of production in a heartless economic system, and people walk around saying, gosh, I feel like a lone unit of production in a heartless economic system. Okay, so we need to understand this basic principle, and yet the irony is that animal agriculture not only is the most devastating thing to the outer world, it's also the most devastating thing to the inner landscape of our consciousness. It reduces our intelligence so much that we don't even make these connections. And so we're in this situation where, even though we're radiant, beautiful, intelligent, spiritual beings, we've been raised in a society where that basic intelligence has been so reduced that we can't make these connections and see this. So the whole idea is to just make the effort, make the effort to understand these things, to question all of the indoctrination, all of the narratives, especially those that we've internalized. And the other main attitude that I like to emphasize also is the domination of the sacred feminine dimension of consciousness, which is the capacity to be receptive, the inner wisdom that I talked about earlier, this Sophia wisdom. Sophia was the ancient Greek goddess of wisdom. And we have, I used to teach philosophy, philos means love of Sophia, the love of wisdom. That's what philosophy is, the love of wisdom. And yet this Sophia, this feminine wisdom that connects us to the higher wisdom that is available to us all the time, is basically suppressed in our society because we don't want to make the connections. We don't want to feel into what we're doing to female animals, because we have to remember that animal agriculture is not merely human beings, like dominating animals. It's really, more accurately, it's male human beings. It's the masculine men dominating the female animals. It's female animals that are most brutally treated because they're the ones that give birth. It's the female that's hyper confined and treated merely as a sexual object, and over and over sexually abused, and the baby stolen, impregnated again, over and over again. I mean, this is really satanic. This is where our our, our forefathers and mothers, way back 10,000 years ago, when they decided to, for the first time on planet Earth, for some reason, to imprison animals for food, to herd them. It was the sexual abuse of them. That's where they really crossed the line. I mean, it's one thing to own another being. That's already that's already a perversity. But to then impregnate them against their will and steal their babies, the sexual violence, that's where we really crossed the line in our society. Ever since, we we've been engaging in atrocities on a massive scale, and not only causing them, but then eating that violence, eating the sexual and physical violence. And so just we can't think about it, and so we suppress Sophia. Sophia is the spiritual power that loves and nurtures and protects life. It's the foundation of a healthy society. If it's a mother gives birth to a little baby, and Sophia kicks in, and she'll do anything. She'll protect and love and nurture that baby, and that's the foundation of a healthy baby. If we don't have that as a little baby, we're going to be psychologically and physically very unhealthy. If we don't have a caring, loving mother and mother energy. That's the foundation of a healthy society. But animal agriculture is about suppressing Sophia, suppressing the capacity to care. It's really the capacity that we have to care and love and protect life. And so, being raised in a herding culture, the Sophia is suppressed, and when that's suppressed, that allows corporations to come invading into our lives and into the lives of our children with pornography and violence. And Sophia would never allow that. Sophia would be standing up and protecting the environment, protecting animals, protecting children, protecting the neighborhoods, protecting our health. But when Sophia is suppressed, it's easy for these forces to dominate and exploit us. So what we're talking about, I think, with the Real Truth About Health conference and the movement to liberate animals and human beings, is the resurrection of Sophia, the resurrection of the sacred feminine dimension of wisdom that is our true nature. And that brings us to the final aspect of health, spiritual and ethical health, which is the most important thing, because all of these are in service to spirituality, to our purpose on this earth. Why? I mean, it's great to be healthy. It's a fantastic thing. And I know, for example, in the vegan movement, there's this idea that there's a hierarchy of motivation. Like, some people go vegan, or they decide to move to an organic plant-based diet for health reasons. And others say, well, you do it for health reasons, but I'm doing it for the animals. Like, that's better. I do it out of compassion for animals. And in some ways, that's true. We're caring not only about ourselves and our health, but we're caring about the cows and pigs and chickens and the people who have to slaughter them. So we're caring about others. But honestly, being being careful and caring about our health is a tremendously compassionate thing. Our our whole world is made much better by healthy people. Our whole world is harmed by unhealthy people. Unhealthy people are a huge burden to everyone. I mean, I've seen this so much. Like we work with people for decades, and I have friends, for example, who for just as one example, a woman, she goes vegan because she wants to be healthy, and she cares about animals. But her husband, he's a very intelligent guy. He's a university professor, and all, but he doesn't want to have anything to do with it. He wants to eat his meat, and so she goes along and he makes him some meat, but she's always a vegetarian. She's a vegan even. And then at one point, he has a stroke caused by his diet. And now she has to take care of this husband who doesn't even know who she is. His brain is, for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years, she's saddled with this because he didn't care. So this happens so much. I mean, our entire society is harmed and burdened. So when we're proactive about our health, we're a great blessing. We're helping the world. I mean, sick people are a burden to our society. We all have to pay for the exorbitant healthcare costs. The United States, as we all know, has the highest, most expensive healthcare system, so-called healthcare system in the world, and we're like way down on the list in terms of health. And all of the drugs, the massive quantity of pharmaceuticals, they go through us, they go into the water, they're harming animals and wildlife, these drug residues, and other human beings. So when we're unhealthy and we're taking pharmaceutical drugs, we're causing a lot of disease and harm to other living beings. So the more we're healthy, the more compassionate. I mean, that's a manifestation of tremendous compassion and kindness. And so that's just as compassionate to care about our health as to care about animals, because when we do that, we care about everybody. But our spiritual health has to do with living our purpose. And so we're not here, though. The point I want to make is we're not here just to be healthy, right? We're not just here on planet Earth to be healthy for 70 years and then die. We're here to do something. We're not just human beings, we're human doings. It's good to be a human doing. I mean, it's good to be a human being, to take time every day. I take 2.5 hours every morning for meditation, to just connect with the ground of being, the silence. Music, this piano is silent, but it can create tremendous beauty. It always comes out of silence and returns to silence. And each one of us is a melody that emerges from silence and returns to silence. And our melody, our purpose, our music, our life, it glorifies consciousness. And we have a purpose. Each one of us has a unique purpose. And the more we are living and in touch with our purpose for this life, the more our cells are just here to serve that. And if we don't have that connection with a purpose, then we're going to be very easy prey for addiction. Because we are unhappy. We need to have a purpose. So again, as I said earlier, we steal the purposes of animals, we lose our purpose. And so the next thing I want to emphasize is just the idea that historically, this is all has a purpose, has a reason. 10,000 years ago, and what is today Iraq, for the very first time, we started herding animals. Like you see, at the very beginning of this cycle of our society, we had herding animals. If we go back before the herding revolution happened in Iraq in the 10,000 years ago, I think we see a whole different way of living, people more in harmony with nature. But this, just very briefly, animals were reduced. So it was wild sheep at first, then wild goats, and about 2,000 years later, wild cows and other animals. And so animals were reduced to being mere objects that are bought and sold by the pound. Other animals are reduced to being mere pests. We try to get rid of them, the wolves and bobcats and prairie dogs and so forth. That led to, for the very first time, to a wealthy elite class. I used to teach college courses on these ancient texts, like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Iliad and the Odyssey, the ancient Old Testament writings, and the ancient writings that go back maybe 5,000 years ago, you can see back then already the system is well established. There's always kings. There's always this wealthy elite class. They're dominating everybody else. Why? Because they have livestock. They own capital. So we have capital. It's the old Latin word capita, means head, as in head of sheep and goats and cows. That was wealth. So these are the proto-capitalists who took control of their societies, dominated their societies because they were wealthy. And so we had this rising of a violent, warlike, patriarchal, uh, hierarchical society that invented also war and slavery. There had never been war and slavery on planet Earth until we had the war against animals and slavery of animals. And so the oldest word for war that we know of, the ancient Sanskrit word gavya, literally means the desire for more cows. That led directly to slavery, because what I've learned is that whatever we've done to animals, sooner or later we've done to each other. So we started to own them as property. Pretty soon we said, well, whoever lost the war, because wars were about the rich getting richer. A rich king who had a lot of livestock would see another king who had livestock and land, because you always need land for the livestock, and he'd say, I'm going to go take those livestock and get some of that land. And so they had these huge clashes. Whoever lost the war, the livestock became the property of the victor. That was the purpose. And then the people became the property. They said, well, we own the animals, we own you. And so they started impregnating humans against their will to create more slaves and buying and selling slaves. And so we have traffic, and we have slavery now more than ever. We have to really understand that. I mean, it's just because we outlawed it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We still enslave animals, and we still enslave each other, and we're still trafficking and enslaving human beings, because the underlying mentality and practice of slavery of animals is still intact. We have to stop enslaving animals in order to rise to the ethical level where we'll stop enslaving human beings. And enforce medicating and all these things that we do to animals, we do to each other. And that led also to the domination of the feminine. The female human being began to be seen gradually merely as a breeder. And if you read the ancient texts, you'll see that with time they're buying and selling women just the way they do livestock. And so this domination of the feminine is part of herderism. But also it's harmful to boys, to the males, because the role model for young boys to emulate, that we're taught to emulate, is the role model of a hard, tough, disconnected male capable of violence against animals and ecosystems and rival herders. And so this whole system essentially is devastating to ecosystems. It's devastating really to our natural intelligence and kindness and health. And this way of living, of herding animals, spread from the Eastern Mediterranean into the Northern Mediterranean, and from there into Central Asia, and eventually to Europe. And of course, then through the colonial period, it spread throughout the entire planet, and it's still spreading right now. As I say, when Madeline and I travel to Africa, for example, and we can see how elephants and other animals, lions and zebras and all these animals are now the enemy. They want to kill all these animals off because they're interfering with our livestock. So this is spreading through what I refer to as the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media, banking complex. We have this huge complex that's built up over the years. It works very well to bring most of the wealth into the hands of a tiny, tiny minority at the expense of everyone else. And it's propagated through McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Burger King and Cargill and Monsanto and Bayer and the IMF and the World Bank and the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and all of these organizations and corporations and financial institutions are basically working together in many ways. And we've got to the point now where 1/10,000th, that's what it is, 1/10,000th of 1% of the human population, that's about 8,000 human beings, control everybody else. It's very easy for just a few people to control and dominate livestock. It's become the same way now with technology, for a few people to control and dominate everybody else. So the whole idea is to understand that we have an alternative, this fantastic possibility of a vegan way of living based on ahimsa, or nonviolence, loving kindness, kindness and respect. It's nothing to be proud of. It's just coming back to our true nature, seeing beings when we see beings, not, not taking out our wallets and paying human beings to do the worst possible thing and enslave and sexually abuse other living beings. And it's based on an LOWFPB, a local, organic, whole food, plant-based way of eating and living, and which is based on abundance, healthier ecosystems, healthier economies, healthier people, more justice, freedom, equality, more harmony and peace. So these basically all go together, and they're all available to us. There's nothing stopping us. That's the great good news, is that we, each one of us, can absolutely thrive and celebrate our lives here on a fraction of the land, and we could create societies based on this. I think it really calls us to decentralize the power structures and start to grow our own food, to reinvigorate local economies, and to minimalize. I think minimalism is fantastic. Just living with less, realizing that joy never comes from consuming. Joy comes from within us. We are inherently joyful. Just to be alive and look out of our eyes and see the beauty of nature and the precious opportunity that we have for a few short years on this earth is a source of joy, and we can share this joy with others. We don't need to get something to be happy. That's a great delusion. So these are the universal principles, the golden rule. Don't do to others what we wouldn't like to have done to us. Whatever we reap, we will sow. I call that the boomerang effect. These are taught by every wisdom tradition, every religion, and the complete interconnectivity of all living beings. That we're all interconnected. We're like fingers on one hand. If I'm playing the piano, it really works because the fingers are cooperating. The one finger's not saying, "Get out of my way. I'm more important than you are." We're all here to serve a higher purpose. All beings tremble before violence. The Buddha really emphasized this. All beings fear death. All beings love life. See yourself and others, then whom can you harm? Whom can you hurt? What harm can you do? This basic idea, when we see ourselves and others, and then as Robert Louis Stevenson said, everybody sooner or late sits down to a banquet of consequences. This is it. This is the key thing to remember. And we, for all of our tremendous technological so-called progress, we're facing the consequences, and that's really what comes here. Okay, so I'd like to go along here a little bit more. So the first thing I want to I'm going to talk about the 6 keys here. I see that we've used about an hour and 15 minutes, so I'll kind of go quickly through this. I want to have about 15 minutes or more, and then maybe have open it up for questions. So the basic idea is the first key is of the 6 keys is a healthy diet. Now, the word diet comes from the old Greek word dieta, which means way of life or way of living. So this is a big subject, and I've already given the foundation. So plant-based foods are the foundation of a healthy diet. Organic, whole plant-based food. So one of the things I really am kind of appalled by is how the vegan movement has been taken over in many ways by unhealthy so-called vegan foods, Impossible Burgers, and all these other things, and that are genetically engineered. Very often they're unorganic. They have toxic pesticide, herbicide, fungicide residues. So people can say, "Oh, I'm eating vegan food now," and then they'll say, "Gosh, I tried living as a vegan for 6 months and I felt terrible." And no, we should be eating whole, organic, plant-based foods, whole food. So we do that. Madeline, I'm really blessed. I mean, Madeline loves to create food. We grow a lot of our own food ourselves, of course. But we buy oats, and we have a hand grinder, and we roll them ourselves, and we make rolled oats. We have that for lunch pretty much every day. We have a green smoothie with pretty huge bunch of greens we get from our garden. A lot of our own walnuts and almonds that we grow ourselves, and fruits, apples, and other things. And so I think the more we can buy organic or buy it from local people, and then of course grains and nuts and seeds and legumes are just fantastic sources of healthy food. So we don't really take many supplements. The other thing I should emphasize here is that the proof is in the pudding, right? So I originally went vegan back in 1980 for the animals. I became a vegetarian in 1975 because I went on a spiritual pilgrimage with my brother. We decided to leave home right after I graduated from Colby College in Maine, 1975, and so thought we'd walk all the way to California with no money. That was our spiritual, pilgrimage, and our parents gave us their blessing, and we took off and we meditated. We were doing the meditation that Ramana Maharshi recommends of going deeper and deeper with self-inquiry. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Going deeper and deeper with that. And we ended up getting as far as Buffalo, New York, and then we ended up walking south. We just said, let's just walk south and keep ahead of the cold front because it was October. We had no money. We just walked, and we survived. We ate zucchinis and apples from people's gardens. So we get to know people a little bit, and tried to help them. And we stayed a lot in churches and even gave some talks on the importance of trusting what Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and everything else shall be added unto you. There's a lot of profound wisdom in that saying. When we put the most number one priority on our spiritual path, that's the key. That's the key to everything. When we put our number one priority on the spiritual path, on a spiritual awakening, we sow the seeds of happiness and health. And that's it. I mean, that's then our wisdom opens up and we begin to be guided in the right direction because we're focusing on our spiritual awakening, that we're not just merely this bag of bones that's going to end up in the dirt again. No, we are the infinite eternal consciousness that makes this possible. And our true nature is loving kindness and joy and creativity and freedom and abundance. And we are eternal beings. All of us are manifestations of this one infinite eternal life. And to come from that, to realize that, to ever grow more deeply into that understanding and see that in ourselves and see that in others, and address the best in others, to see the best in others. This is really the truth, because the best is beyond good and bad. It's actually the perfection of being is really what we are. And so when we understand that, so for me, we ended up at a place called the Farm. It was the largest hippie commune in the world back in 1975. They were mostly people from California, and there was about 900 people. They were all vegetarians. They said they were actually vegans, but no one knew the word vegan back in 1975. So they said we're vegetarians, but they didn't eat any meat or dairy products or eggs or even honey. They were really like, and they had about 200 children that were born on the farm. They were all vegan from birth, and they were thriving. Everybody was thriving and on a plant-based diet, and they were growing a lot of their own food. So that was it. I have never eaten meat in my life since 1975. So that's 50 years ago. And Madeline was the same thing. In Switzerland, she never ate meat in her life again in 1975. And I have to say, I have not been to a drugstore. I have not taken one pill of any kind for anything in 50 years. I haven't been to a doctor, haven't had health insurance. I mean, I've stayed out of the medical system. That's been I don't say you should do that. I'm just saying that's what I've done. Although I will say, when I was younger, I had an appendicitis. I had my appendix taken out. Dairy, right? I mean, dairy is a massive source of money. Tonsillitis, appendicitis, breast, prostate, and colon cancer, all the sore throats, runny noses, earaches, I mean, acne, everything. Dairy, animal-based foods. It's just a huge bonanza for the medical establishment. So I had an appendicitis. I had a a bicycle accident when I was a kid, and I ruptured my spleen. I ran into, so I have no spleen. That was taken out when I was about, I don't know, 13 years old. I've been in hospitals when I was a kid a few times for accidents and other things, but since I was in college in 1972, actually was the last time I ever saw a doctor. Or I still go to the dentist occasionally, have my teeth cleaned, but my teeth have been fantastic. And so, in general, I've just stayed out of the medical system, and I just take responsibility for my own health through these 6 keys I want to share with you. So that's what I mean. I'm saying the proof is in the pudding. I think, Madeline and I have both of us have stayed out of the medical system completely. We just don't. I don't go for tests. I don't know what my cholesterol is. I don't know anything. I don't know. I don't want to know. I just, I just I just eat in a loving way, for compassion for all beings. And I have to say, I've traveled the entire world with an incredibly schedules in some of these countries, like in China and India and Southeast Asia and Europe, where people said you can't do that. That's too many events. You're going to be exhausted. You're never going to make it. We did fine. We never got sick. I haven't been sick in over 30 years at all. I mean, so it's we've never missed a lecture. I've done 4,000 lectures. We don't. So the whole idea is just to realize that when we live in harmony with our true nature, when we live in harmony with the universal principles, and we allow ourselves to be guided by our inner wisdom, then we'll be drawn to maybe sometimes outside authorities will have good ideas, but we can use those ideas. I'm not saying not to use doctors or the medical system if you're guided to do that, but to really take responsibility. See, that's the thing. If I give the responsibility for my health to the medical establishment, I will be really sick because they make money on sick people. They make no money. They haven't made any money on me in 50 years. Right? Zero money on me or Madeline for 50 years. And so that's their worst nightmare is people who just like never use them. Then they have no money. They have no power. They can't have ads on TV promoting their drugs. They wouldn't have any money to do that. They wouldn't be used. So the whole idea is to take responsibility for our health through our food and all these other things that I'm going to share with you. And when we do that, we see that everything's interconnected: the spiritual, the mental, psychological, cultural, environmental, physical. But to go from a lower understanding, see, science in our society of materialism, it's all down here. And we're called to go to a higher vibration. And when we go to a higher level of vibration in our thoughts and in our way we live, then everything is uplifted. And that's what we can do. We can all do that. So plant-based foods, organic and unprocessed. Like I say, Madeline does bake bread, but we just buy the spelt grains, and we have a stone grinder. We grind it ourselves, and it's fresh. I just think it's so good to try to minimalize and get back to take the power ourselves and take a little extra time and really and it doesn't take that much extra time. Madeline has a whole series of videos on YouTube. If you just go to our YouTube channel, go to worldpeacediet.com, but you can see all these. She's got, I don't know, 50 videos on preparing healthy food that's delicious, nutritious. It's not difficult, really. Also how we eat and prepare the food. So it's not only what we're eating, that the food is organic, whole plant-based foods that provides all the nutrients we need to thrive and be healthy. I would say it's good to have a pretty big percentage of uncooked food, at least half. We eat about half or maybe 2/3. Uncooked is, it's got a lot of life force in it. And but cooked food, I think it's great. We eat our dinner is usually potatoes or sweet potatoes or rice or quinoa or bulgur or buckwheat, kasha, something with vegetables. And we get, starch is a great source of energy. And we need energy to run our bodies. So but also how we eat and prepare the food is important. So it's not only what we eat, but how we eat. So eating with a real sense of gratitude is very important. To make the connections between our food and what it took to get onto our plate. Really make those connections. Also to use pans that are healthy. We've met people who, when they changed the pans that they were cooking their food in, chronic disease went away. Most people don't realize that if our pans are very usually very kind of inexpensive. We use maybe aluminum, or we have some kind of coating, Teflon, or we have cast iron, or we have stainless steel, or we have Pyrex. All of these leach metals into the food and toxins from the metals. So it's really good to buy surgical steel, high quality pans. Like there's a couple of companies. I think, let's see, one of them is called Healthcraft, one is called Salad Master. They're more expensive, but they'll last forever. We've had our pans now for 30 years and they look like new. So get really high quality. The pores of the metal are so tight, I guess it is. They have titanium and steel and surgical steel, and so the foods don't stick very easily and naturally, and they're just they don't leach because very often metal like steel or iron is recycled. It could be cars or battleships. You don't know what it was, and it's recycled and it's in your pan, and now you're eating and you're getting toxins every time you cook something. So spend some money and get good quality pans. Uh, and then also the awareness of that we're eating not just the food, but the prana or the chi, the energy of the food. Like in India, they would teach the women this understanding that it's not just the food that is nurturing their family, it's the energy, the love they put into the food when they're preparing it. So eating uh, mindfully, but also preparing the food mindfully. When Madeline goes into the kitchen, she's just it's a meditation for her. She's caring. I love, and I'm the same way. If I'm preparing food, I just do that. I don't watch TV while I'm preparing the food. I'm actually putting love and attention into the food. Food is very sacred. It's important to feel that. When I was in a Zen monastery, they only allow the senior monks to prepare the food because uh, they know that when you're meditating, if you're eating food that's prepared by people who are distracted or upset, then the energy of distractedness and being upset will be in the food, and it'll disturb the meditation. So this is an ancient wisdom. So be calm and joyful as we prepare the food, and we're putting that energy into the food. And then of course, if we're eating if we're eating terror and fear and pain and misery, I mean that's why the Zen monastery I lived in South Korea, Sangwangsa, had been practiced vegan living since the beginning for 750 years. It goes back thousands of years, this understanding. This is not a new understanding. But for that monastery where I lived for 750 years, there was no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, no silk, no leather, no killing of animals, no killing of mosquitoes or insects. It was all based on ahimsa. So if we're eating non-organic foods, we're eating physical toxins of all kinds. I've talked a little bit about that, and we don't want to do that. But if we're eating animal foods, we're eating metaphysical, we're eating terror and fear and pain and despair and anxiety. We do not want to build this beautiful temple of our temporary physical being with bricks of misery and violence. We want to build it with bricks of joy and love and cabbages um, and grains and so forth. So, and fruits and nuts and seeds that are grown with, if possible, grown with love and caring. That's what we love about growing our own food. The more love we put into our garden, the more love comes back, and we can recycle everything. All of our kitchen scraps, all of even our what we would call sewage. It all goes back into the garden, right? We can all the nutrients go back, and the information from us, from our bodies, goes into the garden. So the plants have their wisdom. That's something to really understand. It's an understanding that's been lost, that when we grow our own food and we put our love into the garden ourselves, the plants have a wisdom, and the food is not just food, it's medicinal food. It becomes unique just to us. Like in Sweden and other countries, they have uh, what they call, the liquid gold, which is human urine, right? Because it's full of nutrients, it's full of nitrogen. I mean, why would you just throw that away, right? So this should all go back. This is a fantastic thing to feed to the plants. It's not just nitrogen, but it's information. And so we've strayed so far away from these understandings. So when we grow our own food, the plants, we enter into a sacred relationship with the plants, and they create foods that are just for us uniquely. And this is something that we can all start to learn about and engage in, is this healthy, sacred relationship with the plants that we're growing, and then the fruits that come, the tomatoes and cucumbers and eggplants and apples and oranges, and we're growing out lemons, all these things that we're growing here. They're they're created from our love. We've been doing this now for 13 years. It just gets better all the time. So yeah, healthy plants, structure the water. It's a good idea. Water going through pipes and tubes, it gets compressed. The molecules. It's not natural. So we structure the water. Is something, I think it's called natural action technologies. It makes us something that swirls the water. When water's in lakes and streams, it's the molecules are open, so we don't have to. So we structure the water that comes onto the land. So in the garden and into our house, we need to drink less water, and we're satiated. We don't need to water the plants so much. The water is more bioavailable. Also, how much food we're eating is important. Fasting is a great thing to do from time to time. We can also do intermittent fasting. That's what we do. That our last meal of the day, we finish eating at 6. We don't eat again the next morning usually till 10:30 or so. So we have a long period of time for our body to cleanse every day. We take time out to cleanse, fast for a few days, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. We've done fast 10 days sometimes. So we could look into fasting. Fasting is a great way to cleanse. And that's a whole huge subject, but it's what we're eating, it's how we're eating, it's how often we're eating. Not overeating is really helpful. That's well understood. And then also just to look into besides what we're eating food-wise, to like the water we're drinking, make sure it's structured. Run it through a purifier, a good one. Get the fluoride out. Fluoride is well known to dumb us down. It also makes us more docile. So you want to have your spirit alive. Make sure you have a filter that takes out fluoride, because fluoride in the United States is pretty pervasive. Even though it's good to see Utah just passed a law to outlawing fluoride, so that should happen everywhere. But there's other toxins, pharmaceutical residues. Make sure you have a really good filter to take out pharmaceutical residues. And other toxins, and air. Make sure your air is healthy and turn over the air. It's amazing how the indoor air pollution is a huge problem. People have their houses closed up. I'm amazed. Madeline's from Switzerland, and she's always opening the windows and opening the doors, even in the middle of the cold weather. Just open them up and turn over the air. Learn to live without so much heat, I think, and air conditioning. I can't understand. I think that's one of the reasons people in the winter, there's always the so-called flu. A lot of this so-called sickness is not sickness. It's just the body cleansing, getting, coughing and sneezing and vomiting and rashes and diarrhea and all these things we call it being sick. It's just the body cleansing. It's not bad. It's good. Right? The body's cleansing. We took toxins in. We're getting bombarded with toxins, so our body has to cleanse. It gets sick. I know, for example, if I go to a restaurant and I say no MSG and somehow they put MSG in, I get a headache. I know they put it in. And that headache is bad. And I don't like it, but it's good. That's a symptom of my body getting rid of that dang MSG, cleansing it out. So it's really important that we cleanse, and that we understand the importance of not only healthy food and water, but also air. We're eating maybe one or two and drinking 1 or 2 quarts, whatever, but it's 11,000 or thousands and thousands of quarts of air every day. And so get fresh air. Get into forests if you can. I mean, or trees. Trees are our best friends. And then also be really aware of personal care products and cleaning products. We're so bombarded and so astonished. We stay, as we travel around the country, we get to see a lot of medicine cabinets of healthy vegans, and very often I'm shocked by all the toxic chemicals in shampoo and makeup and soaps and things, and toothpaste, tooth products and cleaning products, and washing detergents, and just stop it. Just really, if you put it on your skin, you should be able to eat it. I haven't used sunscreen in 50 years. And I just get out in the sun and my skin gets used to it. So I think it's really important to try to minimize really our exposure to these toxic chemicals. We have to be proactive in not in reading labels. Just really be proactive, reading labels on everything that you use for personal care and cleansing, everything in your environment. And then finally, the media. We're consuming media all the time too. And we have junk food, we have junk media. So many lies, disempowering information is pouring at us all the time. So it's really critically important that we guard our gourd, as we used to say on the farm. Guard your mind. Only allow in what is informative and helpful, and learn to develop a healthy relationship with the books and media and computers and so forth that we're interacting with. So okay, I'm running short of time. I'm going to go a little more quickly through this. The second key is meditation and spiritual practice. Very important. It's nothing exotic. It's just simply practicing an alert, wakeful, relaxed attention in the present moment. It's a natural human capacity. We can do many different types of meditation, aware of our breathing, self-inquiry. What am I? What is the source of what I am? Go deeper into that great adventure of understanding our true nature. We can also do meditations of radiating love, compassion, joy, and peace. That's called the Four Viharas. I have a guided meditation on our website, and we have CDs of this. We have other meditations that we offer. It's a fantastic thing to radiate love, just to live our life all the time. When we're standing in line at the post office, when we're driving our car, just send out love, compassion, joy, and peace into the world. As we do that, we establish an internal environment of love, compassion, joy, and peace for ourselves. We can also do the practice of taking and sending. This is a really powerful, it's a kind of an advanced practice, but for people who are really concerned about the state of the world, it's basically just sitting quietly and allowing ourselves to take in the suffering of the world, the suffering of animals, the suffering of people, and then convert that suffering in our heart into freedom and joy and radiant love and health, and radiate it out as light and joy into the world. We can be a force for healing the world, taking in the pain of suffering and sending out joy and freedom into the world. So there's many different meditations. The idea of samadhi is very important. This is a state of consciousness where we are one-pointed. If I'm playing the piano, if I get into a samadhi, it's like the music just starts pouring through, comes from somewhere else. It's tremendously healing and liberating. We can do this in meditation when we really get into the present moment at a deep level. It's very healing. This is enormously healing. We have to remember that our body is being created moment by moment by our consciousness. If we want to have a healthier body, get a healthier consciousness. It naturally happens. It's by far the most powerful way. It's invisible to our science. Our science doesn't know what consciousness is. It ignores it. It's incredibly barbaric and really primitive. We have a very primitive science, extremely primitive. So we have to understand that consciousness is the source of everything, and we can connect with the three nens. I have that written down here. Well, absolute and positive. Absolute samadhi is when we're sitting quietly in total, without thinking, just in the present moment. Positive samadhi is when we're actively doing something in that state. The three nens, it's a good point just to be aware of. We have the three thoughts, right? So as we go through our life, we have the first nen is the awareness of me. Well, actually, the first nen is actually just the sensory input, like seeing, hearing, so forth. That's first nen. The second nen is the sense of me, like I'm seeing, I'm hearing, I'm feeling, I like this, I don't like, The third nen is the thoughts that connect everything together. So we go through our life in the third nen mainly, like we don't just see, we have our interpretation always going on. I like this, I want to change that, and we go through our life on the third nen. So meditation in many ways is simplifying our consciousness, and so that we get into the second nen where we're just aware of ourselves seeing, and then if we can get to the first nen, which is pure seeing, then we're in many ways liberated from the burden of always judging and complaining and sharing and these imposing ourselves. This is a practice that we can develop. We have meditative activity that's can be very helpful. Breath meditation, sleep meditation is very important. We should really make our sleep a time of empowerment, and make sure we have a very healthy sleep environment. Get rid of any Wi-Fi, get rid of any light and sound, and go in a meditative way. And our dreams can be fantastic ways of learning and growing as well. So we have a whole waking and whole dreaming self that is very often divorced from our waking self, so we can integrate those. It's very helpful. So anyway, there's a lot to meditation, but this is really the foundation in many ways of health, healthy living. And that leads right into the third key, which is healthy relationships and communication. You know, I've met people, and I think we're all aware of this, who really eat healthy and exercise and everything, but if psychologically I'm still angry at my parents or at my ex-husband or wife or whatever, I'm creating disharmony in the body. So we can be proactive in creating healthy relationships, and this is something to really work on. Right association. We become like whoever we associate with. We become like the people in our lives. So really be proactive in like, who is it that I would like to have in my life? Like, who am I going to marry, or who am I going to have close in my life? And really build those relationships in a healthy way. And the main way to build a healthy relationships is through positive communication, really communicating and learning how to communicate and being positive in our communication also. They did studies on relationships, and if it's 50-50, for example, like if half of in a relationship, if half of the communications are positive, like saying good things, I appreciate you, I love you, thanks for who you are, and half of the communications are more critical, like, well, I didn't really like how you said that, and so forth. Basically, 100% of the time, it ends in divorce and separation. It's only when it gets, if it's 75-25, that's maybe half the time. It's only when it gets up to like 85-90% of the time, really. I say it's positive. And 10% of the time, we're critical. Then you have the foundation of a healthy relationship. So I think this is something we can all do. Everyone we ever meet, everyone we ever are relating with is having a difficult time, really. I mean, quite honestly, living in our society is not easy. We have so many challenges, economic challenges, career challenges, emotional challenges. So the more we can just shine the light of loving kindness to people, everyone in our life, the more we're building joy in our entire interconnected web of relationships, the fabric of relationships that we're part of. Just continually radiate into the infinite web of relations as best we can, kindness and forgiveness and caring for others. That not only helps others, the irony is it helps us. It makes us, we just find our health getting better. Our teeth, our eyes, everything gets better. It's we are not just physical beings. We have to really understand that. And metaphysically and in consciousness, the more we abide in this, the more it manifests in our physical, in the world of our affairs, abundance, and in our relationships and in our physical body. This is something that the seven deadly sins and the seven heavenly virtues. I would like to discuss that, but I don't think we have time. It's really interesting, but the basic point is the seven deadly sins, which are pride, greed, envy, lust, gluttony, anger, and sloth. All seven of those are promoted in our society. They're all considered virtues, right? The one we're proud, we want more, we consume, we we want to be comfortable, we don't want to have to work, we have signs that take away. I mean, sloth, all these we divide, we're proud of being outraged at things. We promote all seven of these, are all promoted in our society. And the virtues, to just cultivate the virtues, cultivate humility and gratitude and chastity, and really these just, it's so wonderful, and patience and diligence and temperance. When we cultivate these virtues, this is universal, then this is a discipline. But a better way to spell discipline is with a BL instead of a D, blisscipline. Because the more we cultivate these virtues, the happier we are. The more we cultivate these seven deadly sins, which are promoted continually in our society through all the advertising and all the institutions in our society, the more miserable we become, and the more miserable we make each other. The seven heavenly virtues, I mean, sex is used to sell everything, right? The more we can just look with eyes that respect all beings without trying to use them in any way, the more healthy we are. So these spiritual and religious wisdom is critical to health, and it's being repressed in our society by our materialism in our society, which to enslave us, to realize that we're all related. The fourth key is the healing power of movement, reconnecting with our natural movement. One of the things I emphasize is getting back to the earth again, getting closer to nature, sitting closer to the earth. We don't have any furniture. This is the only furniture in our entire house. This piano bench where I'm actually sitting up. No, like my desk, I have a zafu, a little cushion, and I'm sitting on the floor. I just started doing that when I was living in meditation centers my whole life, when I was in my 20s. And we did everything on the floor. We have a dining table on the floor. We have, I just think getting back to the earth is really, it's an idea, because chairs and everything, couches, it's all designed to make us sort of comfortable in a way that our back is supported, but then our posture isn't very good. It kind of throws us out of kilter. So to really be proactive in how we hold our bodies, what kind of postures we take to get all the way down to the earth and get up again. It's good exercise. People live like this for thousands of years, being closer to the earth. I talk about this quite a bit in the psychology of it and the philosophy of it, but reacquainting ourselves with the earth again. Squatting more. Squatting is a natural posture for having a decent bowel movement, for giving birth. Again, our whole society takes us away from this. When I was a Zen monk in Korea, I mean, there was no such thing as a sit-down toilet. We always squatted, and there was never any problems with bowel movements or with colon cancer or anything. And now I went back to Korea 40 years later, after being a monk, and I saw they took away the squatting. Now it's all these sit-down toilets where now they have bowel cancer, and of course they're eating more meat now too. But the whole idea is to question the way we hold our bodies, the furniture, the clothing, the shoes. I mean, shoes that have heels, bare feet, and connecting more with nature is really helpful. Exercising, of course, is important. Strength training, aerobics, also Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, energy moving. I spend a good, at least half hour every day in these things. Taking a swim I ride my bike, take a swim every morning. In the cold water is fantastic. We really need to understand the importance of moving, how we hold our bodies, and energizing ourselves. Our body is really designed to move. Understanding this idea of specific adaptation to impose demand. Our body, whatever demands we put on our body will adapt to that, right? So if we hold our bodies in ways that are not good, we're going to shut down the circulation. If we use our bodies, the muscles get stronger, right? So our bones, the same thing. So really understand these principles is very important also for health. The fifth key is the healing power of nature. Just take time every day to get into nature. Forest bathing is tremendous. Just getting into nature, into trees. Trees are our greatest friends. They've a lot of research into forest bathing, which comes out of Japan. It's a whole practice, but just going into a forest normalizes all kinds of things in our body, our breathing and our blood and everything else. The elements really opening up to the sun. The sun isn't just light and heat, it's intelligence, it's information. Just tremendous. It's very important to connect with the sun every day. Connect, just the opposite of what they said to do during COVID, right? Just the opposite. Get fresh air, sunshine, exercise, see the beauty of nature around us. Really allow ourselves to savor the beauty of nature. We are nature. Create a space of love. Gardening is fantastic. Connecting with the earth, having a morning routine, grounding, all these things. So I have so many stories of healing in nature. Nature is our great healing friend. Every day we should try to connect with nature and take some time, maybe a few days where we go on vacation into nature, camping and so forth. And then the sixth final one is creativity. The more we're creative, the more we're connecting with the healing power of our true nature. Everything is vibration. Understanding the chakras, understanding that we have these energy centers, these seven energy centers, to move our energy up, right? To the lower chakras, survival and just sexual gratification and power. If we stay in those lower chakras, we're going to have a lot of disease and unhappiness. When we get into the higher chakras, the heart, loving kindness, the throat, creativity, the third eye up here, which is our intuition and spiritual understanding, and then of course the crown chakra, which is spiritual awakening at the highest level, realizing that there's one life living through all of us. The more we bring our energy to a higher vibratory levels, the more we're in harmony. And I think for me, creativity, I mean, for me, playing the piano, for example, I mean, and of course, if I look around the room, Madeline's paintings are everywhere. There's harmony and beauty and vibratory reality in music and art and architecture. So to be proactive, again, to surround ourselves with love, with creativity, to be creative, to find ways, creative outlets, and through writing and dance and movement and art and music. I can't even imagine, there's such a tremendous adventure available to us. It's an escape from the delusion of our society. To me, I was thinking this the other day, I don't know why they allow pianos to be made. I can sit at a piano because I went through all this practice when I was a kid, because my father played the piano. That's one of the things I emphasize. Veganism, health, everything. It's a practice. Practice, practice, practice. It's this practicing. Every morning we get up and we practice. So as a kid, I wanted to play the piano like my father, and he said, "You can, but you got to practice." So he gave me lessons, and I practiced every day. I practiced my scales and all these things, and so that practice brought freedom. That's the key. It brings joy. Discipline brings joy, and diligence is the most important of all the virtues. When we're diligent, we will definitely succeed. We will definitely succeed. And if we're not diligent, we will definitely not. I mean, if we're not diligent, we're not going to get anywhere. It all comes back to diligence. If we really are committed to something and we're diligent and we practice and do our best, we will make progress. And progress is the most important thing in healing and in understanding and being part of the awakening of humanity on this planet. It's practice that allows us to be part of the solution here, to bring harmony and joy into the created order. We can do that. We are, each one of us, a beautiful note, a beautiful melody, a beautiful rhythm, a beautiful harmony. And our life is an adventure. So we understand really that truth ultimately is beauty, and beauty is truth. There's a tremendous liberation in this understanding, and that is our true nature. And out of that comes love for the creation. So that's kind of what I wanted to emphasize. We've taught to be kind, respectful, considerate, honest, and so forth. And so we become vegan, right? It's this natural thing. Like, we don't want to cause harm and misery and violence and disrespect to other human beings and other animals. So we move in that direction. We cultivate gratitude. Gratitude is really the the mother of all virtues, I think. We can be gratitude, we can be grateful always, no matter what's happening, that we have a life and that we have the possibility and that we're part of the beautiful unfolding on this earth. And when we live from that place, then we are fulfilling our purpose. So there's lots of things we can do to develop that capacity. So I want to just stay in touch with everyone. Feel free to see our website, worldpeacediet.com. And we have lots of videos there and articles and our tour schedule. We're doing events online and also we travel quite a bit. We live in a little tiny van when we travel now. It's it's what is it? 5 feet wide by 7 feet long by 3 feet high. We live in that for 5 months. And I just love it. You know, minimalism is so great to just reduce how much we need. It brings tremendous joy. So thank you all for your kind and loving efforts. No effort we ever make is ever lost. Every effort we make is part of bringing the healing to our planet. So it looks like I've succeeded in using up all my time, which I didn't want to do. I'm going to stop sharing here and go ahead and I guess turn it over to Michael for the final, whatever.
Yes, I was hoping it's a very interesting topic. You have a very unique perspective. I would, we basically have a minute, and I think we're still waiting on our next speaker, so maybe we can take up a couple of minutes if you're okay with that. I don't know what you're
Sure.
saying. Well, first of all, so you have a very unique message. Who are others that are talking about what you talked about today in the same way that you're talking about it? Are there others that you find?
You know, that's the weirdest thing. There aren't that many. I think Dr. Gabriel Cousins, he's a lot on the same page with veganism and spirituality. Our good friend Judy Carmen, who wrote the book Homo Ahimsa and Peace to All Beings, she emphasizes quite a bit the importance of spirituality and health. And I think there are the Buddhist groups. I mean, and religious groups in general. Quite a few of them. Like when we go to Taiwan, for example, we see these schools where the kids are all vegan. They're growing their own food. It's all organic. And they're teaching creativity, and it comes out of a Buddhist perspective of compassion. We also saw it when we went to China, this whole community of Confucian people it's all vegan, and it's out of respect for nature and animals and elders and children, and it's a sort of non-theistic spirituality. I think the Seventh-day Adventists have a strong spiritual and health perspective. The Jain tradition, also the yoga tradition in general. Ahimsa is the first yama, the first teaching of nonviolence, and then out of that we have these practices. So it's really a universal teaching, but in our society, a lot of people don't really connect it so explicitly as I'm doing, and I think we need more people to understand this, really. I also, when we go to Hippocrates Health Institute, we teach there every year. Brian Clement, there's a big, strong component there of mental attitude, exercise, and healing food. They work together. I think that's another place, a very healthy place. So, and spiritual communities, Supreme Master Ching Hai, the Loving Hut, they have these vegan restaurants, but they're really based on spirituality, on meditation, compassion and kindness for animals together. So it's an ancient wisdom tradition that in many ways has been lost. It's been suppressed, but it just lives in the marrow of our bones, I think, as human beings. We know when we hear these ideas, we go, yeah, that's true. I know that's right. And it's just been so suppressed, but it's important to bring it back now, I think, more than ever.
And what about the aspect of what you were talking about with regard to um, this lifestyle of growing your own food, feeding yourself, not getting sick, being a viable alternative to what I would refer to as like a system of oppression? Anyone else talking about that?
There are some. There is a movement now. Like there's a guy named Jim Gale who created the Food Forest Abundance movement. It's really wonderful. We just visited him in Florida, and he's just teaching people to have a food forest. Whether you have like 5 acres or all you have is a little tiny a porch or something. It's just a few square feet. You can start creating a food forest. Growing your own food, and becoming more self-sufficient for food and live in harmony with the earth and don't use chemicals and pesticide and herbicide and fungicide, and make friends with the birds, and make friends with your neighbors, and create neighborhoods that are self-sufficient for food, and decentralize and become more energy self-sufficient. Use solar, like on our land, all our energy is from the sun. We have, we're basically energy self-sufficient, and food, we're trying to get food self-sufficient, and we encourage other people to do the same thing, so that we have a more healthy, decentralized cultural fabric.
So you have solar panels, is what you're referring to?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so you go around and you've been all around the world speaking this type of message. Do you how do you find that it resonates, and how do you actually motivate people to affect change?
In generally, I think people are hungry for this message. And when we go to other cultures, like when we go to China or Africa or Southeast Asia or something, I think they especially liked that it was somebody from the United States coming, because, Americans have this sort of image of being wasteful, over-consumerist, unhealthy people. And so I really think that if Americans would especially adopt a more frugal, less consumerist, more natural, just stop buying into the whole pharmaceutical, medical, consumerist meat, dairy, and egg thing, and really become more minimalist and more vegan. It would have a huge beneficial effect on the whole planet, because people still look to the United States as kind of the way to live. They want to be like us, and kind of, because I really felt that, like, oh, you're an American, you're from California, oh, we want to be like you, So to be able to actually do something that's healthy, and I'd say, we should be like you, because going to Africa and Asia, their natural indigenous foods were basically plant-based, and they were much more in harmony with the religious, spiritual wisdom of the interconnectedness of all life, and the family all eating together and not going off by themselves, and everybody eating by themselves, and looking at their cell phone while they're eating. They were much more, already had so much wisdom. So I was telling him, don't be like you always used to be before McDonald's came in and Burger King came in and the West came in. Go back to your roots, and you'll go back to your natural sanity. That's really what it is.
So one of the things that I found very interesting when I went to Asia was how much more time people there spent with their family, their friends, and their loved ones. Compared to the US, it's like they have 5 or 10 times more lifetimes with their loved
Right.
ones than what we spend with ours. And so it does bring that web. Do they over there in these cultures that seem to have more of what you would like to see? Do they also have a herding culture, or do they not have a herding culture?
Yeah, that's interesting. Like Taiwan, people say, what's the most vegan country in the world? And I say, I think it's Taiwan. I mean, just because they have so many vegan restaurants and the schools and so many Buddhists, and they really have this, just tremendous thing. But they don't have anybody herding animals either. I mean, they do have some people fishing off the coast, but if they're going to eat meat or dairy, they import it from Australia or New Zealand or from somewhere. So they don't have enough land to grow their own food. So they have kind of an advantage in that way. They grow a lot of their own plant-based foods. And but like in China, for example, yeah, they have a herding culture. They didn't used to. They never had cows until the West kind of brought so they never did dairy. So they've been kind of freed from that. But most of these other societies, it's growing. I mean, it's really introduced by the Americans. Like when I was in Korea, the people were out there in their rice paddies when I was back in the early 1980s when I was there. When I went back just recently, like 40 years later, I could hardly recognize it. There was nobody out in the rice paddies. They had converted a lot of the rice paddies. These Texas beef people came over and taught them how to grow feed grains for cows, and now they're eating a lot more meat and dairy, and now their diabetes and liver disease and kidney disease and heart disease is all skyrocketing, and they're eating more like us because they're eating more animal foods, and that's considered progress. That's considered development, is to eat more animal foods. So in a way, the whole system is set up the pharmaceutical industry, the petroleum industry, the meat, dairy, and egg industry, everything, the governmental agencies, they're all set up to try to get people to become more like us because that's how they make more money. And so, again, I'm encouraging people to, go back to your rice and your vegetables, and and so I think people are beginning to understand that now too.
Great. Well, I have so many more questions for you, but unfortunately, that concludes our time. So I
All right.
really appreciate everything that you shared with us today. It was very fascinating, and I'm definitely going to be reading your books. If on the topic that you spoke today, which book would you recommend to read first?
Yeah, the one, I mean, the food, this little one is just the practical. If you just want to have the practical, like how to really thrive and be healthy, that's the one. If you want to get deeper into the philosophy, I think both of these, I mean, both Food for Freedom and the World Peace World Peace
All right,
Diet,
so read all three is what I'm hearing. All
yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, if you really
Excellent.
want to, understand the big picture, those are the ones. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it was an absolute pleasure to hear you speak today. So I really appreciate it. If we can unmute the audience so they can share their appreciation for Will as well.
Let's see.
Thank you, Will, so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Tuttle,
And they
Dr. Tuttle,
still
Thank
doesn't have a
you.
Dr.
passport.
Tuttle.